In the previous section of this lecture, we looked at the distribution of temperature and rainfall across the United States. Now we'll look at the implications that this physical geography had on agriculture and therefore human settlement in this region, particularly in the 18th and first half of the 19th century, running up to the outbreak of the Civil War. You'll note in this map that shows the distribution of agricultural crops in the United States, you'll note three major zones. First of all, in the southeast, the warm, wet quadrant of the eastern half of the United States. This climate was suitable for the production of cash crops, initially tobacco, but then increasingly in the early half of the 19th century, cotton. To the north, in the northeast quadrant of the country, a temperate and moist climate was suitable for food crops. These include grain, dairy, fruit, and vegetables. Thirdly, in the western half of the country, the much drier climate produced only a grassland or prairie that was suitable not for agriculture, but for animal husbandry, for the grazing of cattle and other animals that could be exploited for their meat and dairy products. And finally, in the very dry southwestern section of the country, the climate was simply too dry for any vegetation, and as a consequence produced a desert. The adaptation of human beings to these various climates followed the cropping pattern. First, if we begin in the southeastern United States with the production of cotton, notice that cotton is a lightweight, high-value, non-perishable crop that can be grown in great abundance and shipped down the river to New Orleans for transportation across the Atlantic to textile mills in England or eventually to the northern United States. This type of economy favored large plantations, large tracts of land with relatively small numbers of white owners and overseers, and a large labor force working under difficult conditions, which could be filled or was filled by a black slave population. In the northern United States, the situation was quite different. As we indicated, this was an area that favored the production of food products. These food products are relatively heavy in weight, low in value, and perishable, and under the conditions of the 18th and early 19th century could not be shipped economically to large markets. And as a consequence, this type of agriculture favored the self-sufficient family farm, a small number of related individuals who could settle a modestly sized piece of territory, grow their own food, and maintain a self-sufficient economy. In this context, slave labor was not only undesirable, it was dysfunctional, because slaves had to be maintained during the long winter months when there was little productive activity, and therefore the populations of the North did not favor slave labor. The point being here that the choice made by Northerners and Southerners was not primarily due to their social or cultural background, but to the adaptation of the physical geography and the functionality or non-functionality of slavery as a form of economic production. Finally, in the very far southwest, where it's very dry, there was no option for any type of settlement. Whereas in the Central Plains, it was possible to move family economic organization into the plains, either to extend agriculture, principally the production of grain in places like Nebraska and the Dakotas, or further west to set up ranching. The extension of plantation-based cotton production, however, was much more limited in the Central Plains, because as the climate became dry, it was increasingly difficult to produce cotton on large plantations. Therefore, the migration west was much more suitable to the family farm organization of the North than it was to the plantation economy of the South.